Today, I'm going to talk mostly about building and keeping a successful tutoring program. And I don't have a picture. I didn't have my kids draw a picture of me because I'm kind of afraid what it would look like. Now, I can see the horns and the tail and pitchfork and stuff, so I figured I'd better not ask them to do that. When Stephen asked me to do this, a couple of things went through my mind. One, that he'll probably, after the day, he probably won't ask me to do this again. And then two, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. So I asked a few people, and they said, okay, Sam, whatever you do, you got to be funny. They know me, I'm not a funny person, so how can I do it? So I came up with a joke. So without further ado, here's my joke. There were two tutors applying for a tutoring position, and let's call them John and Jessica. And they both, that's John over there, by the way. And they were both equally qualified. Same grades, same coursework, same experience. And the coordinator had a very difficult time trying to decide who to give this one position to. So the coordinator decided to give them a test. Gives them a test, he leaves the room, comes back an hour later, collects the test, leaves the room, comes back 10 minutes later, and he tells them that you both missed the same question. He pulls John aside and said, John, I decided to give the position to Jessica. Of course, John was upset, but why did you give the position to Jessica? We both got the same number of questions right. Coordinator says, well, I based my decision on the question you got wrong. Jessica answered, I don't know, and you answered, neither do I. All right, so I'm glad you laughed at that because I didn't want to bring out sturdy jokes. All right. Okay, so I would like to share with you a quote from Lloyd Alexander that I found that I thought was very relevant to tutoring and to educators and the things that we try to instill in the students that we work with. We learn more by looking for the answer to a question and by not finding it than we do from learning the answer itself. And I thought that was a really profound quote because as tutors, as educators, as teachers, we want to instill in students, we want to instill in them that the journey is just as important or not more important than the destination. Once they find the answer, they're like, okay, let's move on. They don't want to have anything else to do with that problem. And so if we're continuing to help them find the answers to their questions, they're almost always going to learn something. Okay, so again, talking about building a tutoring program. Okay, you weren't supposed to see that. Okay. So talking about building a tutoring program, there are certain things you need to look for, especially if you're just starting out or you're trying to put together a program. Okay. So my first question to you was going to be, what are one of the very first things that we need to do in order to build a tutoring program? Okay? And everyone sees the answer. What's the very first thing we need to find? We need a mission statement, of course, right? Okay. Because we can't even begin to look for tutors unless we know what we're about, unless we know what we want to do with the students that are going to come to our centers and going to come to our university. Okay. So we need a mission statement. And not only do you need one, you want to know what it is. You want to make sure your tutors know what your mission statement is. And you probably want to stay away from a mission statement like this. But pretty much a mission statement is just a statement that defines your goals, your objectives. Okay, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want students to leave from your center with? What do you want them to take away from the process? So here's an example of a statement. The mission of the tutoring program is to support the success and retention of the diverse undergraduate students at the school by, 1, listening to students and providing individualized and group assessment of any and all student needs relevant to success. Providing students with learning skills and strategies tailored to each student's unique learning style. Providing content-based tutoring in mathematics, science, statistics, and other areas. serving as possible academic role models for students, and serving as a source of referral for student programs as a program. Okay? And again, you have a mission statement that lets you begin to sort of shape and mold your tutoring program. Okay? What type of tutors do I need? I need tutors that are going to mold or gel with this mission statement that I have. Okay? How many of you have mission statements? Do you know what they are? Do your tutors know what they are? Because you definitely want to know what they are. You want your tutors to know what they are. So as they're going through the training session or as they're working with students, they have a better idea of the type of skills that they need to impart in those tutors. Okay? So if you don't have one, you may want to think of drawing one up. And if you have one, you want to make sure that everyone who works in the department, in the program, knows about your mission statement. All right, so got the mission statement. What's the next thing we need? Vision. We need people. We have vision, okay. Well, and mission statement, of course, will support the vision. But let's sort of move ahead from that. Once we have the mission statement, then we got to do a little bit of work to actually go out and find the tutors. And finding tutors can be a difficult job. Anybody here in charge of actually hiring tutors, finding tutors? Okay, then you know that it's not a very easy process. Okay? There are things that we tend to look for. Okay? One of the things that we tend to look for first is how well they did in that particular course. How well they do. So we look for a grade, either minimum grade in the course or minimum GPA. Okay? Because there's certain assumptions that we make about grades. We think that someone who has a 4.0 or an A in a course has more knowledge of that material than someone who has, say, a C in a course. Okay? So we look for someone with grades or someone with high grades, because again, the assumption is that the higher the grade, the more content knowledge the person has in that course. So we may go ask instructors, okay, can you recommend students? And some instructors may just look through their grade book. And this person say, where is this person? They look through their grade books and say, okay, these people did well in the course. These people got all 4 points. Okay? Because there's an accounting course at my university that we provide tutors for, because who knows, the accounting department, they have a help room, but they do not provide tutoring for this particular accounting course. Okay? And so every time I need a tutor for that accounting course, I would email the instructors. One instructor's been teaching this course for probably as long as I've been at the university. I've been there in this position for like 10 years. I would send an email and say, hey, Fred, I need more tutors for your accounting course. And he's more than happy to recommend students. But I don't think he personally knows who those students are, because we're talking about a large lecture hall like this with 200 plus students in it. And he says, okay, Sam, let me give you a list of all my 4 points. Okay? And as you know, just because a person got a good grade in the course doesn't make them a good tutor. Okay? Because grades alone do not tell the story of an individual. It doesn't tell how passionate they are about the material, about learning, about tutoring. You can't get that from grades. It doesn't tell you how reliable a person is. They got a 4 point, maybe this is a course that they feel that they had no problem with. Maybe they missed half of the class. There's no way of showing that they're going to show up, because you want tutors that are going to be where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. So grades, even though it tells you, hey, this person did well in the course, may not tell you how reliable they are. Dedication. How dedicated will that student be? Are they going to be dedicated to something that they don't know? Are they going to be dedicated enough to learn that material? Are they going to be teachable? Are they going to be trainable? Are they going to be dedicated to go that extra mile to learn something that they don't know, or to develop the skills that they don't have? Definitely doesn't tell you about the communication skills. They can be the best, get the best grade in the world, can't talk to a single person, never talked to a single person, never worked with a single person. And of course, study skills. Because among other things, one of the things that we as educators, as tutors, as teachers, try to teach our students is to be independent learners. And I've heard this saying, you've probably heard it, our job is to teach ourselves out of a job. And so we want students to have these study skills. And if they don't have them, how can the people who apply for tutors give those skills to the students? So we got these grades, students who have 4 points, but we need more than that. So then you're talking about, okay, well, how do you assess those skills? Then, of course, there's the traditional way of assessing those skills. How do we assess whether a student has those skills? No hands this time. Huh?
You have to show us the next slide yet.
Transcript that.
Well, you call them in and you talk to them. You interview them, you ask them questions. Okay? Those of you who missed Lori's, she's over there, who missed Lori's presentation this morning, she talked about behavior-based interviews. Okay? So you call the student in, you ask them questions, okay, to get a better idea of what type of skills they have and how well and how much of those skills they have. So you ask them typical questions, tell me about yourself. Students say, well, what do you want to know? Why do you want to tutor? Well, because I need a job, I need money. I'm good at it. I'm good at the subject. I've always been good. Why not? Do you have any tutoring experience? Which, not having tutoring experience doesn't disqualify them from being a tutor. Okay? But again, these are questions that we ask to help get a better idea of whether or not they possess those other qualities, those other skills. Okay? And again, I'm not going to talk much about the interview process, because when you sit there, you talk to students learn, they're smart, they even take courses and seminars on how to interview. So some of them they're the best interviewer in the world. You say, oh my God, this is the greatest tutor ever. You hire them and they're a completely different creature from what you said, what's said in front of you. And you're like, okay, where's this person? And I talked about, hate being late, always shows up 15 minutes late. Person saying, well, I never let my students leave without making sure that they know how to do problems, and when they're actually tutoring, it becomes a different story. Now, one of the things that I do to sort of help give me a better idea of what skills the students actually, the potential tutors, let's call them that, actually have, is I put them through a mock tutoring session. And what I do is before the session, I look and I say, okay, student has good grades. Okay, based on the information from the application, I say, okay, well, I'm going to invite them in. So before the session, I will send the candidate a list of exercises. The student wants to tutor math, I say, okay, they list on the application, I can do algebra, I can do trigonometry, I can do calculus 1, 2, 3, and 4. I say, okay, here are a list of algebra problems, trig problems, calculus 1, 2, 3, and 4 problems. Show me what you can do. So I tell them to do those problems, and once they are ready, contact me for an interview. I send them an email, I send them the problems, and I put in bold letters, when you are ready, contact me for an interview. Now, students think, okay, I got an interview, that's an automatic hire. That's not the case. Now, the mock tutoring session, sending the problems ahead of time will actually weed out some of the candidates. Well, how does that happen? Students, they say, hey, I was just too busy, I did not have time to work on these problems, but they called to set up the interview anyway. Maybe they're taking too many credit hours. Maybe at this particular time in the semester, this is not a good time for you to tutor with us. Okay? Although, during the interview, you're asking questions, and by the way, the mock tutoring session takes place at the interview, so after I'm done asking them questions, I say, okay, now we're going to have you help a student with these exercises. They say, well, I didn't have time to do the exercises because I'm taking 16 credit hours, and I'm studying for my MCATs, and, well, then why should I think that you're going to have the time to tutor if you can't have the time to prepare these questions? Why do I think that you're going to have the time to prepare for the tutoring session if you don't have time for this? So I'm not saying that they're not a good tutor, but right now, it may not be the best hire. So that student's put in the later pile. Oh, and then I get some of the students that, like, what? Huh? What problems? Was I supposed to do problems? Did you send me problems? I said, yeah, I sent you some problems. You didn't reply to the interview, and to my email, you replied to the email that I sent you that had the problems in it. Okay, well, I didn't have the problems. So they try to finagle their way through my tutoring session, and most of the time it doesn't go very well. And so that person goes in the never contact again pile. Then you get the students that say, okay, I can tutor algebra, trigonometry, calculus 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then they get the problems and they realize, whoa, I can't do all of this. Maybe I can only do algebra and trigonometry, but can't do calculus 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, which is not bad, but at least you know before you actually hire them as a tutor for Calc 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So sometimes the candidate may contact me and say, well, you know, after looking at these exercises, it's been a couple of semesters since I've taken Calc 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right now, I may not be the best tutor for Calc 1, 2, 3, and 4, but if you need a tutor for algebra and trigonometry, I'm your guy. Okay? And that's fine, because I may need a tutor just for algebra and trigonometry. But it's good to know that before I hire that person and have them listed as a tutor for Calc 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So I think the mock tutoring session, one thing that it will do is kind of weed out the candidates and that tend to look good in the interview, answer all the questions the exact way you want them to answer it, but they have difficulty. Well, first of all, they can't get past the first process because either they didn't have the time, they didn't see the problems, or I didn't send them to them, or they just realized that maybe I can't do as much as I said I was going to do, so can I do a little less? Okay, and that person would say, okay, I may put this person in a maybe file depending on what I see in the other candidates. Now, once that level is gone, so once we get to the serious tutors, or the serious candidates, then we start to say, okay, here's a question, and what I will sometimes do is have one of my current tutors come in and be a student. And that's great. So if you ever do this, it's great to have a current tutor come in because they know the potential questions that new tutors are going to get. They know how students react to certain procedures and certain processes. So it's great if you ever do this to have a tutor present. So, things you can get from a mock tutoring session. It's communication skills. How well does the candidate communicate these ideas, these concepts, to the student? Yeah, that's great communication, isn't it? So how well does the potential candidate communicate these ideas to the potential student? Okay? Is it something where they say, you know, maybe things came easy to them, and they have no way of explaining or do not know how to explain the information to another student? Or the tutor will start asking, or my current tutor will start asking the candidate questions, and the tutor becomes frustrated. Saying, what do you mean you don't get this? It's right there. It's simple, it's easy. You gotta get, and I've had potential tutors say that. So it's easy. What don't you understand about this? And of course those students are working for me, right? You can see how they write, or even if they write something. Especially with math, and I'll share this with you. I'm using math examples a lot because that's most of the courses that we tutor, a lot of math and science. But you can get an idea, okay, when when the candidate is sitting there with a tutor, trying to work out exercises, what do? What's their process? Do they have technique? Do they write anything down? Do they have the tutor write anything down? You can get a better idea of the kind of techniques they have. You can get a better idea of, again, how they communicate, the words they use as they're explaining something to a tutor. Because during the interview, when you're talking to them, there are things they probably would never say. But during the mock tutoring exam, you'll see them scratching their head and saying, very frustrated, I don't understand how you cannot know how to do this, how you cannot do this step. Okay? And you can see it on their face, they're really. So then, after the mock tutoring session, you can, of course, talk to them about this session, how they felt about it, what they think went wrong, give them some pointers, or even have the current tutor talk to them about what they did wrong, what they could do to make it better. You can see how they think, how they solve problems, techniques they use to solve problems. Do they analyze their answers? Do they check to see, or do they have the student that they're working with check to see if the answers are correct? Now, after you go through the process again, after it's done, you can ask them questions. How did it go? What do you think went wrong? And then you can give them your opinion. Well, this is what I didn't like. You didn't give the tutor or the student enough time to answer the question. Okay? I believe, 30 seconds is what it's supposed to be to wait and let someone answer the question. Or you didn't let the student ask any questions, or you didn't let the student write a single thing. You did all the writing for the student. And not to say that every mock interview session is going to go perfectly well, because that's what the training is for. Maybe during the interview session you saw something in the student and say, hey, this would be a great tutor if they had better study skills, or if they had better communication skills. And you said, okay, we're going to hire you, and we're also going to put you through our training session. And you say, okay, can you do this? If you can do this, you're hired. Now, there are several things that we do at a training session, and I have an activity that I want you to get an idea of one of the things that we do. And this particular activity is something that we haven't personally done, so you're actually trying it out for me so that I can sort of see how it works. So you guys are my guinea pigs. There are people I gave slips of paper to. Can you raise your hand? Okay, so I got one row, so out of this other rows that I need, I have more. Okay, I got that row, don't have that row, so I'm gonna just give that to you. Don't let anyone see it. Keep your hands up so I can see what rows don't have. I'm gonna give that to you. And middle person. Don't let anyone see that. And you got a row there. You don't have that. Okay, you may have to move down. You guys, don't share that. Yeah. And everyone has rows. Okay. I have a row that doesn't have one? Okay. Middle person. Yeah. So you guys can find over. Just one. Don't show it to anyone. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, now every row should have a sheet of paper. Is there a row that doesn't have a sheet of paper? Okay, good. Okay, now, here's the activity. The person who has a sheet of paper is going to describe something to the row. Okay? And it is the row's job, the other people in the row's job, to draw what the person is trying to describe. See, you didn't want it. See? Next time someone asks you to volunteer, you're going to raise your hand. And here's the kicker. There are certain words that the person cannot use. Like, for example, they're trying to tell you how to draw a baseball. They can't say ball. They can't say base. So there are certain words that they cannot use. And so I'm going to take 3 minutes, and the person with the sheet of paper is going to describe that item to you, and you have to draw it the best way you can based on the directions from the person with the paper. Okay? All right. That looks like they've already started.
It's a way to get from one level of the building to another. Think of the way that you see, for example, a screw. The piece of metal that puts two pieces of wood together. It functions along that line, and people can climb from one level to another, not going in a straight line, going more in a curved manner. Yes, in fact, very curved. As in the flat cross-section of the shoe. A plane going through a shoe. So that's the overall shape of this thing in 2 dimensions. Does that make sense? So it's a way to go from one floor of the building to another. You go around as you go up or down. Does that make sense? Swirling from the whirlpool.
I know, I can't draw it.
Well, at least draw with words. You have something you can think. If you're not good at drawing things artistically, then write a verbal record.
You know what it is? But you know what it is? Maybe it's right here.
You ever saw my class? Oh, wow.
If you're an older fan, he's also one of those. A rock band, I love you more today than yesterday.
What time is the next session?
I'm trying to give you
Oh, okay.
There's plenty of time.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. I think you did
Sam,
So,
15 minutes.
yeah, that's essentially what it is.
Okay, time's up. All right, so let's first talk to the givers. Tell me, how difficult was it?
A little.
It was easy for
What?
Just a little.
Which one did you have?
I had accordion, and
Oh,
I could
okay.
not say keyboard, I couldn't say bellows, musical instrument. But I said polka, which is not music, but musical instrument.
Ah.
She said it was something that Weird Al Yankovic played.
Squeeze it.
So the actual direction was explaining them how to draw the. But,
No, it said no, it said do not use this, don't read aloud. I think you have to describe as an accordion. You may not use your feet. So I know the answer to that.
Did people not get it?
Yeah.
Did people not get it? Rose not get it? Just you? You only one that didn't get it?
Yeah, that was the name of the group.
Right, I did it to draw. Did you ready to draw? You ready to draw? Who
I
gave you
thought
the
that
direction?
might jog somebody's memory.
So
You're not old enough to know.
How were they decided? Were they?
I do not. It's not. I knew the song.
Yeah.
Now I knew who the group was.
Now you'll never forget. Not that you care to remember it,
The
but
giver. the giver, did you have to make any assumptions about what the person knew, what they didn't know?
A little bit.
And I'm assuming that, well, probably a lot of you probably know each other since you're sitting around, but imagine, you're working with someone that you never met, you don't know what their background is, what their skill level is, and so sometimes there are assumptions that you want to make, but you aren't quite sure whether students will, whether those are correct assumptions. But what about the people who were supposed to draw the figure? How did you feel? How were the directions? Did you wish you had more? Did you tell me about, yes?
Well, when I described it, I didn't describe how to draw it,
Okay.
so maybe that was the issue of not actually understanding how to do it properly.
Okay.
But once we figured out, or once they figured out what it was, they could draw it easily. So
Okay. Anybody else? Any of the drawers? Okay, how did you feel? Did you feel like you were never going to get this? If anybody didn't get it, did you feel you were never going to get it? And no matter what the person said, you just weren't going to be able to get it? I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes students are like that. They say, I didn't get this in class, and they come to you hoping that you'll shine this light on them and say, oh, this is great, I understand it. But sometimes students just don't get it. So then as the giver, what do you do? When a student doesn't get it, as the giver, what do you do? Change your approach.
Ask questions.
Ask questions.
Say it again and be louder.
There you go. You get a megaphone and say, okay. Because we always know that works. Maybe there's another tutor in the room who has a little more experience with the course that could explain the problem in a way that you haven't explained it. Yes?
Sometimes you need to take a step back. Sometimes you need to take a step back and give them a break for a second so their anxiety level comes down a little bit before you go forward again.
Yeah, sometimes a person will come in and they just hyper, they're like, I'm never gonna get this. They're very anxious, they have high level anxiety, and no matter what you say, what you do, they're not gonna get any, yes?
Some of the questions that were asked of me, like, what does it look like? The things I hadn't thought to describe and try to come up with the rectangular ends of the figure and the tubing in between that I hadn't thought to describe when they were trying to draw and ask me what it looked like.
Now it's great when the students start to ask questions. That is like one of the greatest things in the world because they're engaged, they're actually interested in learning the material. So one of the greatest things in the world is when the students start to ask questions. Yes?
What it helped also was, like, when we asked, can you give us, like, size or something? She said larger than a bread box. Well, then, you have something that you didn't know. You can picture a bread box. You had, like, unrelated but previous knowledge that you weren't just dealing with some abstract ethereal.
Okay.
And then, as soon as she said that, I felt myself kind of, like, come in instead of being out there somewhere.
Yeah. Anything else? Yes?
If we had clue what the vocabulary was, she wasn't allowed to give us a word, but and sometimes when you're talking to your student, you're not speaking on the same vocabulary. If they haven't learned it, then they can't ask questions. If they can't say words in math, then they can't ask questions in math language.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Mathematics, especially, they say it's a foreign language because there's vocabulary that comes with it that students must know. And if you as a tutor is talking to them and using this vocabulary that they don't know, then one of the things that you need to do is have the student learn that vocabulary because their instructor uses it all the time. And they're coming back to you saying, I have no idea what my instructor is saying. He's using these big words. Well, he's using the language of mathematics to teach them how to do the mathematics. And if they don't know the language, they're going to be in trouble.
Just
They're
like
gonna
that chart of
I'm sorry?
just like that chart.
Free IT.
Oh, the charger. So, other things you can do in a training session. Again, a lot of it would depend on what you feel your tutors need, what you saw in the interview, what you saw in the mock tutoring session. There are times where I would just go in and say, okay, based on evaluations, maybe I have tutors, math tutors that are stronger in one area, but I need them to be stronger in other areas. So we'll take some time, we'll say, okay, one of the things I got from the evaluations is that you suck at derivatives. So I need you to work well. They didn't say to use that language, but you need to learn derivatives. So let's learn derivatives. And that could be part of their training, having them learn how to do their content a little better. Okay? We tutor students individually. We tutor students in groups. Okay? Some of the tutor training sessions consist of just role playing, having the more seasoned tutors demonstrate to the new tutors how they interact with students that they meet for the very first time, how a tutoring session actually goes, talking to the student, communicating with them, getting the student involved, because sometimes, especially if you have a tutor that you just hired that have never tutored, either a friend, professionally, whatever, then in the beginning, they may be more of a teacher, like they were taught when they would go to math, they would go see their teacher in their office hours, and most of the time what the instructor would do is pull out a notepad and write the problem for the student, do it, and then send the student on their way. And so a lot of times that's what they saw, and they try to mimic that. Okay, but of course we don't want our tutors to just do that. We want them to give students skills. You may need to teach them about study skills. A lot of you may know this already, but sometimes when a student comes in for math tutoring, it's not always about the math. Okay? They can't study, they don't know how to study, so sometimes they need a plan. Okay? Can't manage their time very well because they're taking 16 credit hours and they're working 20, 30 hours a week, and so they need some time management. And you want to have your tutors, you want them to have those skills. You want them to be able to talk to students about how to study the material. Because sometimes I have a student that would just come in and ask the tutor, say, okay, I'm preparing for this exam. How do I study? And you want your tutor to be able to answer that question. Well, how do I study for this chemistry exam? How do I study for this math exam? I have this big accounting exam coming up. How do I study for that? So a lot of times it's not always just about the tutoring. So you want your tutors to be as prepared as possible. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk to you about is the assessment part. And that should pretty much cover two areas. Okay? The first area is helping the tutors become better tutors. And then, of course, the second area is helping the tutors help the students become better learners. So the assessment piece has to do with improving your tutors and improving the students that come to your center. Now, as far as improving your tutors, again, this is going to be based on evaluations that you've gotten back from the students that come to the center. As I said before, they say, Mike was good at algebra, but he sucked at doing derivatives. Then Mike needs to work on derivatives. I would ask, there are questions on evaluation I would ask about how knowledgeable was the tutor about this particular topic that you were discussing. Or did the tutor allow you to ask any questions? Did he show you how to use the resources that you have for the course? Did he show you how to use your textbook? Nowadays, students have paperweights that cost like $200. I have students that do not open the books at the end of the semester. They're still shrink wrapped. They have no idea what's in the book. And so, did the tutor help you use those resources? Look through your book instead of just giving you the answer. But remember the quote that I talked about earlier today. The journey is just as, if not more, important than the destination. Because if we're helping them learn, then not only are they going to succeed in this course, they're more likely to succeed in courses after that. Okay. So if the tutors aren't helping students use their resources, we need to talk in training sessions about how to help students use their resources. So the first part of the assessment, again, is helping the tutor, become a better tutor. Whether it be their study skills, their techniques. So the assessment will ask questions about study skills, ask questions about tutoring techniques. And then it's about helping the student, whether or not we're helping the student or how well we're helping students. Now, a lot of people like to use grades as a measuring stick as to how well they're helping students. But it should not just be about grades. We definitely want them to do well, but we want them to learn. We want them to have study skills. We want them to have the skills that they need to move not from just freshman year, but from freshman all the way through graduation. And sometimes when they're learning something, they may not catch on right then and there, especially depending on when they come to you for help. You know, maybe you get the student that comes beginning of the semester because they know that, hey, I've never been good in math, and so I'm coming here right now so that I can start, so I won't fall behind. Maybe those students will do better in the long run once you give them those skills. And of course, you never have this happen. You get students that come day before the final, week before the final, and just know that if they get a 4 on the final, get an 8 on the final, it's gonna just be, everything's gonna be better. Okay? So at that point, we use that as a teaching moment and say, okay, well, okay, you probably won't get an A on the final, but let's talk about what went wrong this semester and how we can stop that from happening next time. I've had a student come to me and they were trying to decide which math class to take because they weren't doing well in this particular math class and they probably wasn't going to make it out. And their major, they had two options to choose from. They wondered if they should retake the course that they're currently in or take the other course. Okay? Well, one of the first things I asked the students, okay, well, what is it that you're doing in this course that is causing you not to do well? Okay? Not going to class or going to class sometimes, missing exams. And so, you know what I told the student? Doesn't matter which course he enrolls in, if he's doing those same things, he's going to get the same result. Okay, so it's not about what course you're in, it's about improving the skills so that you can do well in any course that you're taking. Okay? So in assessment, you're asking them, okay, are they feeling more confident about the material? Okay. Maybe day one, the student was so scared that they didn't want to grab the pencil, they didn't want to write anything, all they wanted you to do was write. Okay. A couple of days later, a week later, they're in your office, they're pulling out their pencil and say, okay, let me show you something. Okay. So are they more confident with the material? Okay. Are they using their resources better? Are they using their book? Are they looking on the internet for resources? Okay. Do they feel that they're a better learner? Okay, because that's what we want them to be. So those are the type of things that you should be assessing. And then, of course, once you get those results back, do something about it. Just don't let them sit there. Okay, so once you get the results back, do something about it. But the assessment shouldn't always be just about the grades, because we want the students to be able to pass from freshman year to graduation. Okay? And some students are going to take longer than others to catch on. You're going to be really frustrated with a lot of students that come to you. You're going to have your favorite students that are just the best students in the world because they're going to do everything you say. You're going to say, okay, by the time we meet next week, I want you to have this, this, and this done. They come back, they've done that and more. Then there'll be other students, okay, by the time we meet next week, I want you to have this, this, and this done. They come back, I had 3 exams, I had to work, I went home for the weekend, I didn't get a chance to do it. Okay? And one of the things about the tutoring is that you meet a lot of people, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different personalities. Some of them, and someone mentioned earlier today, PS, post-traumatic stress syndrome for math, because they were told back in 3rd grade that they could never do math, and so they carry that on through high school. So those are the things that we as educators, as tutors, are dealing with. Okay? But again, if we stress the importance of the journey instead of the destination, the students that we see will be a lot better off. And they may be resistant in the beginning, but in the end, it's going to be for their good. And so all that's done, we did a great job. I thank you all.